begin, let me do a quick house cleaning. There are 3 restrooms in this building. There's one on this side and 2 on this side, one on the side of the building and one straight back as you go if you need those facilities. It is an honor for us here at Covenant to be hosting this year's joint UCC Maundy Thursday event. I know that in the past it's been a joint communion service, but our Covenant history is that we each year had a Seder supper on Maundy Thursday. And so we decided, since we were hosting, we were going to have a Seder supper this year. And we're so blessed that you are here with us. We are very blessed to have Barry Kurt with us again. He did, the last time we had a Seder supper, he was our Hebrew liturgist and presided over the Seder supper. He did a fabulous job, and a lot of our folks have talked about it for a long time. He also has done ecumenical Seder since 1965. So he's about 29 plus 25 should be in the family. There are numerous Passover Haggadahs that are out and available and around and so forth. As a matter of fact, on the table behind us, you'll find a copy of this one, which is the one that was compiled, edited, and illustrated by Barry. And we have copies for sale if you would like to buy a copy. He has some copies with him that are for sale called All My Bones Shall Speak. And so, but the one that we will be using primarily this evening is, he will be using some of his, but he will be taking us through ours as well. The Haggadah that we will be using this evening was compiled especially for Covenant in 2003 by Dr. Stephen Zacharias. And so please leave them on the table when you leave.
Count on it.
And of course, if you've ever been here before, you know we read from the back forward, right to left. And so with that in mind, let us begin our let's welcome Dale.
It's great to be back here. I want to begin, before you open up, folks, with some thoughts. And this will be different from what I did a few years ago, 2 years ago. But I want to share these thoughts with you before we open the Seder. If, by the way, my voice tails down as it tends to, just wave and I'll come back up again. Okay. The story of Passover actually begins in the Bible far, far earlier than Exodus. The story begins with Abraham. Abraham, at one point, makes a covenant with God. And it's a very unusual covenant because, number one, he's told he will be a father of a great nation, and at that point, he's older than 75 and he has no children. And his wife is 65 and she has no children, okay? So this present, this promise is a little unusual, and he's given a name change, and Abraham in Hebrew means a father of many. And he's got none. So that's the first thing. And then he's told that he is to circumcise, he's actually 99 at this point, he is to circumcise himself and all the members of the males of his family. And impressive, at the age of 99, he circumcises himself, and then all the members of his family. That's impressive. Okay? But then he's told something which directly relates to why we're here. He is told that his descendants will be slaves. What a promise. And that they will be exiled, depending on which passage you look at, for 400 or 430 years. This is the promise. Okay, after a period of time, they will leave the exile with some substance, but they're going to be slaves. And this is what he has to look forward to. Now, we go 2 generations later, and we have 2 brothers. They're twin brothers. We have Jacob and Esau. Jacob's to be the chosen one. The Bible draws a parallel between these 2 sons. Each one has 12 sons. And the 12 sons all establish tribes. Esau gets to remain in the Holy Land. And Jacob, the chosen one, gets to go down into Egypt and see or envision the fact that his descendants will become slaves. And so we ask ourselves, what is there about chosenness that requires slavery? What's that all about? Why is the non-chosen son get to remain in the Holy Land at peace, and the chosen one gets to go down to Egypt and experience slavery? I think the key to all of this comes up later on in the book of Exodus, when the people have come to Mount Sinai and they are given the law. Most people remember that there are 10 commandments. In Hebrew, they're not called 10 commandments, they're called 10 statements. Somebody said that there are certain religions where they're considered to be 10 suggestions. Okay? But following that, they're given a bunch of other laws. And the first laws that they are given relate to servants and slaves, because slavery did exist in the Bible. And the key to the whole question is a single word, which only occurs a few times in the Bible. The Hebrew word is farah. It means rigor. And basically the statement goes something like this. You experienced hardship in Egypt. Now that you are out of Egypt, don't do it to anyone else. That is the connection. And the assumption possibly is that Esau wouldn't have learned that lesson. And so there's no sense bringing him down to Egypt. But the children of Jacob could learn that lesson, and going through pain, they could become more human than if they hadn't experienced it. So Egypt is the training ground for humanity. Now, not everybody passes that test. And biblical commentary suggests that some of the Hebrew people were enamored of Egyptian culture and assimilated. We don't have that as strong evidence in the Bible, but the rabbis who were writing this commentary were writing during the period of the Roman Empire, and for them that was a reality. There were many people who wanted to assimilate into Roman culture. And many of the others were broken and became so broken that they weren't prepared for Exodus. They were too broken. There's a very interesting commentary. The Bible says that they were freed be'etzem hayom hazeh, on the very day that God promised. And one rabbinic commentator said no. They were freed 2 days early. And why did he say that? He said that because if God had waited 2 more days, the people would be so broken that no one would be capable of freedom. It's a very profound statement. Okay? Now, the people of Israel are going to be whether it's exactly on the day or 2 days early, they're going to be free. And they're going to spend 49 days traveling. They're going to go through the Sea of Reeds, and then they're going to spend more time going toward Mount Sinai. And on Mount Sinai, they're going to receive the law. And the commentary goes something like this. It takes them 49 days to recover their humanity. Because the Bible says that as they stood at Sinai, everyone saw, and therefore there were no blind. And everyone heard, and there were no deaf people. And everyone stood, there were no cripples. And if we take by extension, there were no broken people. They were whole. And by the way, the Hebrew word shalom does not mean absence of war. It means a feeling of completeness. And that when you wish someone shalom, you're wishing them to be whole. By the way, it's the same word in Arabic. Salam, shalom, it means the same thing. Now, it's obvious that things are a little difficult because when Moses disappears up the mountain and stays there for a long time, the people need some physical representation. They build a golden calf that represents a difficulty. It takes them 40 years of wandering until they're ready to enter into the promised land. And the existentialist philosophers make a very interesting distinction between being freed from something and being freed to do something. And their statement was, it's easier to leave Egypt than to get the Egypt out of it. You can take the Hebrews out of Egypt. You can't always take Egypt out of the Hebrews. It takes them 40 years of wandering before they're ready. My profession was as a psychotherapist, and what I have found was that if you can visualize your childhood, which may have been very rocky, as Egypt, and can learn to use that Egypt to become more human, then even the pain of your past can have a sense of purpose to it. You may not have chosen it, but you can use it. In support groups today, Mothers Against Mad Driving, who leads the group? A mother who's lost a child. Alcoholics Anonymous, who leads the group? Someone who's dealing with alcoholism. Breast cancer groups, who leads the group? Someone who's been through breast cancer. And it goes all the way through there. In other words, if you've been through Egypt, use the Egypt to express your freedom. Now, in the text that we have an apparent contradiction. Part of the text says, last year I was a slave. This year I'm free. And then a couple pages later it says, this year I'm a slave. May I be free next year. And so the question that we have here is, what was our slavery that we are now free from? What is our slavery that we have to transcend? That's what the text is all about. Now, so a little background. In the Bible, as the people are about to be free, they are given a ritual to follow. And the ritual is they are to take lamb, animal, kid, and to sacrifice it and to spread the blood on the doorpost. And this is to be done by the oldest son. And the Bible says that when you do the sacrifice, you're not to leave your house. You're to stay for the whole sacrifice, and you have to eat the sacrifice that night. Okay? It's no good anymore in the morning. You have to eat it that night. What happens in the history is that at the point where the golden calf occurs, the firstborn children lose the privilege of being the religious leaders of the family to some degree, and the ritual is given over to the priestly caste. By the time we get to the book of Deuteronomy, that priestly caste was located in a central location in Jerusalem. The northern kingdom has its own centers, at Shiloh and so forth, but basically we have a central place. Hebrew men are supposed to go to Jerusalem as many as 3 times a year and bring their first fruits, whatever, to the temple to be sacrificed in the 3 harvest festivals. Now, what happens is interesting. The 3 harvest festivals, which include Passover, are agricultural festivals initially. They have nothing to do with history. Passover, springtime, it's called the holiday of springtime, and there is a springtime sacrifice. 7 weeks later, Shavuot, which means weeks, they have a grain sacrifice. In the fall, they have a sacrifice of fruits. Now, what's the problem? The problem was that the Hebrew people were not great astronomers, and initially they had a lunar calendar. Muslims today have a lunar calendar. Doesn't matter when Ramadan occurs, it can occur any time during the year. But you can't have a holiday of springtime in November. So they had to adjust the calendar to agree with the solar calendar, because that's the way it works. And they borrow an idea where 9 times every 17 years, nice round numbers, they add a month. The last month of the year becomes 2 months. Okay, Adar. And it doesn't work quite, so they have to make some fudges every 83 years and so forth. And as you're laughing, just remember that our notion of the leap year is not perfect either.
Nope.
That every 100 years, on the 4th year, we don't celebrate a leap year because it wouldn't work out. Who knows? 365.14 is not a very easy number to work with. And so there were struggles to kind of fit this together. What happens is that the agricultural holiday becomes associated with history. And that's where we are now. The spring holiday becomes the holiday of freedom from slavery in Egypt. The grain holiday becomes the celebration of the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. Sukkot is not as clear. There's no historical precedent. But the prophets tell us that sometime in the distant future, all of the nations will gather together in Jerusalem to celebrate the oneness of God, and it's going to be on Sukkot. So that's the connection that is made for that holiday. So what we have is an agricultural holiday which then gets associated with history. Okay? Now, this book. The Jews experienced the first exile in the year 586 before the coming of the Babylonians come, they destroy Jerusalem, they knock down the temple, the people are brought to Babylonia, and 7 years later, a small fraction of them come back to Israel. And slowly, somewhere along the line, they rebuild the temple. What happens to the rest of them? They like it in Babylonia. And they stay. It becomes a center of culture, and many of them assimilate. Okay? Just disappear. 10 lost tribes, assimilate, basically. This goes on until the year 70. In the year 70, the Romans destroy Jerusalem. They destroy the temple. And the Romans are so powerful that the Jews despair that they're going to get the temple back very quickly. So they have to remake the religion. And the way they remake the religion is significant. And, by the way, separates Judaism from Christianity exactly at that point. I'm going to discuss exactly what happens. First, we need to know what the word sacrifice means, because it doesn't mean what you think it means. What do you think it means? What does it mean to sacrifice? To give up. To give up. That's not what the Hebrew means. It's not even what the Latin means. Okay? Hebrew, the word sacrifice means to draw close. To draw close to the divine. You don't need to kill a ram to do that. That's what was decided. Okay? The word sacrifice from the Roman means to make something sacred. To lift the ordinary up to the level of the sacred. It has nothing to do with giving up. That's later. Okay, that's a much later notion. So what was decided by the rabbis at the time when Jerusalem was destroyed was there are other ways to draw close to God. If you couldn't perform the sacrifices, you could read them. You could study them. And then the rabbis say acts of loving kindness represent sacrifice. Doesn't mean that it pains you to do something. If you see the woman crossing the street and she's struggling with her packages and you help her across the street, that is a sacrifice. Because it allows you to express closeness with the divine. So the notion of sacrifice changes, and the rabbis say we don't need the temple anymore. Now, in Christian theology, early church, the temple is destroyed because the Jews did not accept Jesus as the Messiah, and therefore God said, we're going to take the temple away, and nothing will, you can't make sacrifices anymore, so you're finished. Okay? Shows that this is going to go to someone else, and that's the dividing point, one of the dividing points between Christianity and Judaism. For the rabbis, reading about the sacrificing, studying the sacrificing, and being compassionate are substitutes for killing animals. And grain. Okay, there were grain sacrifices. Now, what they did was they created slowly a ceremony for Passover. The word Haggadah means telling. And the notion was that you were to tell the story. And the telling of the story is a sacrifice. The telling of the story is a sacrifice. Now, they tell the notion. There are several traditions here. The 4 questions in my family were always done by the youngest child. Why? So the grandparents could feel wonderful. But there's another tradition. And the other tradition is that the 4 questions should be asked by the oldest and wisest person there. Because we always have something to learn. All of us. Okay? So it carries through that even the wisest of people are supposed to go through this text. Now, the model for the Seder was derived from the fact that the Jews at this time were living in the Greco-Roman world. And what would happen in Greece and Rome was men, and I should say this because when I was growing up, the men sat at the table and the women did all the cooking and they did all the serving and so forth. We've changed that. If we hadn't changed that, my daughter would have killed me and followed by my wife. Okay. The men would gather together in what the Greeks called a symposium. Symposium was a dinner at which time people would discuss philosophy. Think Plato. Okay? And they would sit there on long couches, leaning to the left. As they would eat, they would talk philosophy. And this is modeled after that symposium. The notion that, being free people, we can leisure our way through the service like free men or free women. And I'll give you just one story to indicate there's a tradition that you don't even pour your own glass of wine. By the way, grape juice is perfectly acceptable because it's the fruit of the vine. It doesn't have to be fermented. It doesn't come from the vine. Okay, so grape juice is not a bad substitute, it's equal. So here's a story that I got from a Hasidic teacher many, many years ago, and it goes like this. You're not supposed to pour your own glass of wine. You're not supposed to serve yourself. Somebody is supposed to serve you because that's what rich people do. They get servants, okay? Now, so the story goes like this. A man gets a free ticket to visit the afterworld. And the way this always works is you go to hell first.
Oh, no.
That's what Dante did. You go to hell first. So he goes to hell, and there's a table there, and there are people sitting around the table. And the table is piled high with food and drinks and everything that you would want to eat. And he says, how is this hell? And he says, look more closely. He looks more closely, and everybody has a board tied to his elbow, and he can't. So he says, well, I understand. Then he gets to go to heaven. Same table. Looks carefully. Same board. Why is this heaven? People are seated facing each other so that they can feed each other. And that's so the difference between heaven and hell is that in heaven we can face each other, give each other sustenance. Okay. The Seder itself. The word Seder in Hebrew means order. And if we turn to page, there's no pages here. 1. We have 15 steps of the Seder. The first thing is the Kadesh, which is, okay, the little modification here, okay. And it's spelled with a little better, but that's all right. I didn't write it. Okay. Okay. The very steps. You want to light candles because, okay, here's a good one for you. Little theology. Someone says, why do you light candles? If God created the sun and all the stars, what does he need your candle for? What's one candle power opposite the sun? And this is actually quite profound because in Christian tradition there is a big argument as to what was good for salvation. Was it good works or faith? And some of the theologians said, it doesn't matter what you do, God's perfect and infinite, and you're just peanut butter, whatever, and nothing that you can do can possibly impress. And the notion was that God waits for man, and your acts are important. So your candle is significant, and it symbolizes the fact that anything that you do can become a sacred act. So we light candles before every holiday. We have 4 cups. The tradition was the rabbis couldn't decide whether there should be 4 cups or 5 cups. I won't go into the details. And the notion was there would be a special cup that was set up for Elijah. Elijah he comes to all kinds of occasions, and he's supposed to come to every Seder. And as children, we were taught that you look at that 5th cup. And if the level of the wine goes down in the 5th cup, it means that Elijah says that 5 cups are necessary. And if it doesn't go down, maybe only 4 cups. So that was the Elijah cup. So we have 4 cups of wine, or grape juice. Doesn't matter. We have 2 washings of the hands. This is a substitute for the altar. And the priests would wash their hands. And so, it says somewhere we are to become a kingdom of priests, so we wash our hands. First time without a blessing, second time with a blessing. Karpas is this green stuff because this is the spring holiday. So, spring. Okay? So that's the karpas. Now, interesting. We dip it in salt water. So the question is, and I know what the answer is going to be, why do you dip it in salt water? Okay, everybody says it's for the tears. It turns out that the Romans realized that salt was a precious commodity. And they had trouble getting it. So dipping something in salt was to make it taste better. Okay? Now it's okay to say tears, it's fine, but how important was salt? What do you get when you work for somebody?
Salary.
A salary. The word salary is based on the Latin word for salt. Okay? That shows you the importance of salt. There was a tradition that said that if you went to a wedding, a great gift would be the bride's weight in salt. Okay? So we dip this in salt. Okay, reminder of tears, fine, that's good. Also, salt was a precious commodity, and the Romans thought that it tasted better with salt. Okay. Yachats. We have 3 matzahs. We're not sure exactly why there are 3 matzahs. In the temple, there were what they call showbreads, and on the Sabbath there were 2 of these breads. And what usually happens for a holiday is you kind of increase things, you up the ante a bit, so there are 3. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the middle matzah and we're going to break it in uneven pieces. And it's very strange because what you're going to do is raise the matzah and say, this is the bread of affliction, let everybody come and eat, and then you put it away. And 2 hours later, the meal can start. We'll do better than that. Okay? So the question is, you keep the small piece and you put away the big piece. And they say, well, why? Well, matzah has 3 levels of meaning. Number 1, it is the bread of poverty. So, we keep the small piece to symbolize poverty. It's the bread of haste, because it says the Jews left so quickly that they didn't have a chance for the bread to rise. But there's another thing that happens. Matzah is unleavened. And the Bible says that certain sacrifices in the temple cannot be done with leavened bread. So for some reason, the leavening of the bread made the bread not appropriate for certain types of sacrifices. As a result of this, I mean, those of you familiar with Catholic tradition, the consecrated wafer is unleavened bread. It has 2 significances. One, that it was supposed to be from a Passover meal, where Jesus would have had unleavened bread, and also that the church recognized that certain sacrifices could not be done with leavened bread. Certain Protestant sects will use regular bread, but that's the history of the leavening. So we take this and we put it away, and we put it in a special container, and it is called the Affirming. Okay? Now, the word Affirming is a Greek word. It's not a Hebrew word. And so the question is, what is it supposed to mean? And people say it's like dessert. This is not dessert. Okay, we can do better than this. But the notion is that we identify this with freedom. And therefore, there is a degree of sweetness associated with this. Now, what happens? When the Greeks finished their meal, with dessert, they would leave the house and go out and have a jolly time on the town. We weren't supposed to do that. As soon as we finish the meal, we start praying the blessings after the meal. Then we say praises, songs of praise that come from Psalms, and then we go on to sing other songs. And the Bible says, from the very beginning, we are not to go around. We are to stay in our houses and celebrate. So this represents, if you will, a distinction between the Greeks and the Romans and the Hebrews in terms of what you do when you finish with your meal. Now, you hide it. When we were children, we tried to find it because you can't end the meal without a piece of the Affirming. And what you're supposed to do, as well fed as you're going to be, to save room for this wonderful dessert, you're supposed to eat one little bit of matzah to start the meal and save up enough appetite for 2 pieces, the size of olives. I don't know how large their olives were, at the end of the meal. Now, our tradition, which is not law, this is what I was taught, was if you couldn't find the Affirming, you had to start all over again. And one year, my sister found the Affirming, took it, hid it, fell asleep, woke up, and forgot where she put it. So there's a whole thing. We used to gather under the table to try to get this from my grandfather, and he would kick at us from under the table. There's a whole mystique about it. Okay, so this is what keeps the kids around, because they have to do the Affirming. So that's the Affirming. Okay, the Maggid is the big one, is the retelling of the story. The asking of the 4 questions, which, as I said to you before, can be said by the youngest or could be said by the oldest, depending on what tradition you come from. It turns out that in the beginning there were only 3 questions. The 4th question was, why do we have this lamb bone? Are there any biologists here? Why do we have this lamb bone? Biologists? Physicians?
Nobody claiming?
This is
We
not
got
a lamb
nurses.
bone. This is a chicken bone. Why a chicken bone? The Jews realized that the temple was destroyed, and they said that putting the lamb bone was too painful for them. So they substituted something else for the lamb bone. And so this substitutes for the lamb bone. We used to use chicken necks for that sort of thing. Okay, so lamb bone. Okay. We go through the story, and then after we start just before the meal, we start saying psalms. Now, Jewish tradition does not recite these psalms at night time. This is usually part of the holiday festival in the morning. So the question is, so why do we do it at night? And the answer is the rabbis couldn't decide whether Passover should be celebrated at night or in the morning. Because Pharaoh tells them to get out of Egypt at night, but they leave the next morning. So should we celebrate the fact that he told them to get going, or the fact that they actually got going? The rabbis decided that we would do it at night, but they included portions of the morning service at the Seder, and that was their compromise. So the Psalms of Hallel are normally done in the morning, and some of the prayers that follow the Hallel are morning prayers that are done at night to recognize that some rabbis way back when thought that we should be doing this in the morning. Okay, now we go through the matzah. We've discussed the matzah. The moror. There are actually 3 things in the Bible that we were supposed to do to celebrate Passover. One is the matzah, one is the shank bone, which we don't do anymore, we substitute for, and the other is the maror. Interestingly enough, the rabbis say, this is horseradish, okay? It looks to be pretty strong, okay? The rabbis say that the ideal form of bitter herbs was romaine lettuce. So why romaine lettuce? It starts tasting sweet and it has a bitter aftertaste. So that's Egypt. Started out pretty good, turned out pretty rotten. Okay? Now, why do we have horseradish? They couldn't grow romaine lettuce in Northern Europe. They could grow horseradish. So here's the moral. Somewhere along the line, we can form what is called the Hillel sandwich, where Hillel, this is not a rule, so therefore there's no blessing, used to take some of the moror, put it on matzah with some of the charoset, which I will explain, and then we'll get pretty close. This is the charoset. People will tell you, who were raised in a traditional way, that this symbolizes the border of the bricks. No. The Romans used to like sweet stuff with their meals, and they used to make a combination of apples. I could tell you about the apples and so forth. Apples, nuts, wine, and honey to sweeten up the meal. Okay, so later on they had to give a meaning to it. So the meaning was, oh, it looks like mortar, so this is mortar. As you go into the Middle East, many of the Jewish communities add figs and dates to this, but it's a standard part of the meal. And what Hillel would do is he would put together the various parts, soften up the moror with a little bit of the charoset, put it between 2 pieces of matzah, and he invented the sandwich. Okay, the tafun is to find the afikomen. I don't know where you're going to hide it, but whoever finds it is entitled to use his car for the next 2 weeks.
Oh, little noble one. You get a prize.
Okay. The barek is the grace after eating. Then we get the 3rd cup, and here it says Elijah and Miriam, and that's good. There is a commentary that the rabbis have made somewhere along the way that if it were not for the virtuous women, there would be no Exodus.
Amen.
Okay? Now, if you look at the story, you will see how many women get involved in this process. The midwives. It's not clear from the Hebrew whether they were Egyptian women or Hebrew women. It's ambiguous. But in any case, Pharaoh tells them to kill all the male children, and they refuse. That's the first group of women. Pharaoh's daughter. There's Moses. She recognizes as a Hebrew child. She does not throw him to the crocodiles. Okay? Yocheved, the mother. Miriam is following along, sees that Pharaoh's daughter pulls him out and is going to keep him, and she comes up and says, hey, you need a wet nurse for this child. Who's going to be the wet nurse? His mommy. He's going to spend 3 years with his mother. Or it will tell you that the first 3 years of life are kind of important. When he identifies himself as a Hebrew, where does he get that from? Probably from mom. Okay, so now we have the midwives, we have Pharaoh's daughter, we have the mother, the sister, and I'll tell you just another little story that I think is a wonderful story. Moses, somewhere along the line, gets all of these gifts given to the tabernacle. And he repeats all of the gifts. He tells every gift that he has gotten for the tabernacle except for one. What is the one that he doesn't mention? The women who were at the gate of the tabernacle gave their mirrors, that would be bronze mirrors, to the tabernacle, and they were melted down to form the lavers that the priests had to wash their hands and feet in before they went into the temple, or they would get sacked. Okay? Why doesn't Moses recognize that gift? It happens only 22 verses after they give the gift, and he forgets it. You have to have an explanation for this, and the explanation goes something like this. Why should I be using mirrors that are used for women to pretty themselves up for a sacred purpose? They have no place in the tabernacle. There's no place in the tabernacle. And God says to Moses, if it weren't for those mirrors, there would have been no Exodus. So we now need a commentary. What does mirrors have to do with the Exodus? The explanation goes like this. There are two mentions of Moses' parents getting married. I say, what do we need two explanations? Why isn't one enough? One is in chapter 2 of Exodus, one is in chapter 6. Why do we need the second one? So the story is told that Moses' father, when he heard the edict from Pharaoh that the male children would be thrown in the Nile, didn't want to watch his sons be killed. So he divorced his wife. And being a leader of the Hebrew community, everybody followed along. Nobody's married anymore. Miriam, who was called a prophetess at the Sea of Reeds, figures out that the next child to be born from her parents is going to be the savior of the people of Israel. She's got to get them back together again. She's 13 years old. How is she going to do this? She goes up to her father and says, Daddy, you know, Pharaoh is evil. You're twice as bad. Can you imagine listening to this from your 13-year-old boy? And he says, what do you mean? Pharaoh would kill the male children. You would prevent the women from being born as well. So, according to the story, the second description of the wedding is that Moses' father remarries his mother, and the rabbis say he's still depressed. He just can't face the fact that half his children are going to be killed. Depression is not an aphrodisiac. And the rabbis say he is not functional and the men are not functional. And this is their profound comment. I want to leave this with you. One, the women are going to have to carry these children. They're going to have to give birth to them. And the rabbis say, a bunch of men, by the way, 1,800 years ago, that women cope with tragedy better than men. I always, when I say that, half the people shake their head yes. They tend to be the female. Okay? But they have a much more profound comment to make. We're going to be eating food. Animals eat. People eat. What's the difference? We can raise the act of eating to a sacred act. And the rabbis say what the women did was they raised the sexual act to a statement of faith. And so when they took the mirrors out into the fields and dolled themselves up, that was sacred. And God says to Moses, if they hadn't done that, there would be nobody for me to live with. All right? And
I got that.
I'm not sure that you got that in the gloss. Okay. Now, we're not going to do this today, but on the second day of the holiday, we start counting the Omer. Omer is a sheaf of wheat, and what would happen was each day they would go to the temple or something, and they wave the sheaf of wheat, and they would do this until the holiday of Shavuot. The mystics made an exercise, a spiritual exercise, that each day we are to imagine that we came out of Egypt, we are broken people. We have 49 days to become whole again so that we can accept the Torah at Mount Sinai. So we are going from Egypt to Sinai in 49 days, and the Omer is each day to symbolize one step to regain our sense of wholeness. Okay, there are mystic exercises that they do. The Netzach is the songs that we sing at the end. Usually they're children's songs. Most of them come from the 16th, 17th century. A lot of them are acrostics, and some of them are children's songs, but by then the children have their 4 cups of wine and they're lying under the table. Okay, so let's go through then the text. Are there any questions at this point, comments? Yeah.
The one thing I've never been able to figure out, the Seder, is it celebrated on the first day of Passover?
All Jewish holidays start in the evening. Because the rabbis say, if you go back to Genesis chapter 1, it was evening and morning of the first day. So holidays all begin in the evening. So you do the Seder on the first day. Now, what happens, the Bible doesn't say there should be 2 Seders. The Bible says you celebrate the first day and the seventh day. What happened? When the Jews were dispersed among the people, sometimes they didn't know when the day was. Sometimes they thought it was 2 days. To make sure, they did 2 days. Okay? So they celebrated the first and second night, and then they celebrated the 7th and the 8th night. In Israel, they don't do this. They just do one Seder for the first night, and then they celebrate the 7th day. Okay, because they're in Israel and they know when holidays are. Okay, now, again, this was at a time when, you didn't have fax machines and so forth. So that's why it's done. Okay, good. So we start out, and we'll let you lead the first ones. We're going to go forward, and we're going to go through to light.
Let us begin. Here we gather in the presence of loved ones and friends before the emblems of festive rejoicing for our sacred celebration within the household of Israel, our elders and our young ones, linking and bonding the past with the future. We follow once again the divine call to service, live in our stories that is told for all peoples, whose shining conclusion is yet to unfold. We gather to observe Passover, as it is written. You shall keep the feast of unleavened bread, for on this day I brought your hosts out of Egypt. You shall observe this day throughout all your generations as a practice for all times. Be a symbol and fulfillment of this commandment. Remember the day on which you went forth from Egypt, from the place of your bondage, and how God freed you with a mighty hand.
There's one comment here. The purpose of ritual is to collapse history into a moment. We say, I came out of Egypt. It is pretty much the same thing that you say in communion. It didn't happen 2,000 years ago. It's happening now. So the purpose of ritual is to transcend history and collapse it into a moment. And so we all came out of Egypt. Yeah.
Candle, light the candle.
tradition is that the woman of the house would light the candles. If there are no women present, then the men. There's several traditions here. One is that there should be at least 2 candles. Another one is that there should be 2 candles for everyone in the house.
We settle for these.
And the Hebrew blessing is Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel yom tov. Okay, so
Read it one.
yeah.
Happy are those of steadfast faith, who still can bless the light of candles shining in the darkness. Rejoice, O earth, in those who keep the way, for there is still a song for them within you. May the festival lights we now enkindle inspire us to use our powers, to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, O God of freedom.
Okay, yeah. Now we do the first cup. The tradition is you don't pour the first cup for yourself, you pour it for someone else, serve each other. And again, the tradition was wine, but grape juice is perfectly fine for this. No problem at all. And now my wife's grandfather used to say that you need to fill the cup almost to the top to express our sense of joy, but not complete joy. And leave a little space in the cup. And when you drink it leaning to the left as if you were a patrician from a Greek symposium.
Everybody got, everyone got, okay. Our story tells that in diverse ways and with different words, I who was, who is, and who will be, gave promises of freedom to our people. With cups of wine, we recall each one of them, as now the first.
I am the Lord, and I will free you from the oppression of the Egyptians.
We take the Kiddush cup and proclaim the holiness of this day of deliverance.
The blessing goes.
Baruch atah
Adonai Elohim melech haolam, borei peri hagafen.
Blessed art thou, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. We praise you, O God, sovereign of existence. You have chosen for us service from among all nations, and have sanctified our lives with your commandments. You have lovingly bestowed upon us commandments for rest, appointed times for celebration, holidays and seasons for joy, and the feast of Matzah. Our season of freedom, a holy convocation, recalling the Exodus from Egypt. You have granted us this wonderful heritage. Blessed are you, O Lord, who sanctifies all Israel and its feasts.
The following blessing is usually done at the end of the holiday, but it's okay. It symbolizes you're not going to be here tomorrow night. So, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei me'orei ha'esh.
Blessed art thou, Lord our God, ruler of all life, who creates the light of the fire, who teaches us to distinguish between the sacred and the secular, between light and darkness, the sacred from the profane. As we sense the holy, we ourselves become holy to you. We learn to endow each day that you grant us as sacred with his own holiness. We praise you, O God, who has given us to know ourselves as holy.
And the following blessing is said on the beginning of any new thing or new holiday. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyamanu v'hikianu l'zman hazeh.
Blessed art thou, Lord God,
Sovereign of the universe, who has granted us life and sustenance, and permitted us to reach this season.
Okay, now somebody comes around and you wash our hands with no blessing. Again, symbolizing what used to be done in the temple.
now what we need is just bring the water to the city for the ceremony. Reader 2, will you please read?
I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. Who is this fair one coming from the desert, in clouds or myrrh and frankincense? How beautiful you are, my love, how exceedingly beautiful. Arise, my beloved, my fair one, and come with me. For lo, the winter is past. Flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing is here. The song of the dove is heard in our land. Let us go down to the vineyards to see if the vines have budded. There I will give you my love.
Just one comment here. There are certain passages that are associated with the different holidays. The comment here, springtime is in evidence in the Song of Songs. It's a song of love. The book of Song of Solomon had trouble getting into the canon because it's a song about love and pretty sensual. And it's modeled after poetry that was known in that region, which the Bedouin used to sing at weddings to celebrate the bride and groom. The question is, why does that get into the Bible? We start with Moses, and Moses uses a metaphor of God as husband and the people of Israel as bride. And that's carried on throughout the Hebrew Bible. And Jeremiah compares the wilderness to a honeymoon, where God gets to know his people, and his people get to know God. As a honeymoon. And Jeremiah has a wonderful phrase where he says, the people of Israel will no longer call God husband, but they will call God my man. And that gives you an idea of the connection with the Song of Songs. Okay, it's going to be an intimate relationship between God and man. Hosea has a wife who kind of wanders off, and he takes her back and compares this to God taking the people of Israel back after they wander. So this metaphor comes to be all the way through the Bible, and of course, not only Jews but Christians have taken this to be the relationship between God and his people. So this is why it's and how we take the greens. And as you remember, we dip them in the salt water, not only to remind us of tears, but of how precious salt is. No salt, no light. Okay. The blessing goes. Oh, I'm supposed to chant for you. The chanting.
Everybody got their green?
Okay. Passover is the Song of Songs. Shavuot, which is the grain harvest, is the book of Ruth. For obvious reasons, she comes there during the grain harvest. And Sukkot, it's not exactly sure why, but it's the book of Ecclesiastes. And the tune is the same for all three holidays. I don't have the text in front of me, but it's going to go something like this. Hooray, Pri Ha'adamah, blessing of the fruit of the ground.
We now take a bite of the greens.
Yeah, we explained already the breaking of the middle matzah. That's discussed on the bottom of page 8.
We now break the middle matzah and hide one half of the corner. And we're going to do that in
Well, that's you're supposed to be really clever. Hide it so that nobody will see you.
I'll do it when I'm picking up like this. Okay. Later on, we will share it as in the days of old, when the Passover offering, usually a lamb, was shared at the same service in Jerusalem. Among people everywhere, the sharing of bread forms a bond of fellowship. Recalling what the Almighty wrought for us, we say together the ancient words which join us to our people, and with all those who are lonely, who are in need, the homeless, those who are wrongly imprisoned, as well as with those who are outcast and marginalized simply because they are different. We do this because our own redemption is bound up with the deliverance from bondage and oppression of people everywhere. This is the bread of affliction, the poor bread, which our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in want share the hope of the Passover. As we celebrate here, we join with people everywhere. This year we celebrate here. Next year in the land of Israel. Now we are still in the bonds of slavery and oppression. Next year, may all be free. Lord comes for the second time.
Let other people fill for you, and you fill for other people. The tune for this goes something like this.
We return the remainder of the matzah to the Passover cover of our symbol of hope of all those in the world who in despair. Some are crushed by poverty and disease, others by tyranny, ignorance, indifference, hatred, terrorism, and violence. We pray that their pain will end soon, and that they will be brought to a place of internal as well as external safety and healing. We dedicate ourselves to relieve suffering in whatever forms it takes.
So, we did the middle matzah. You are to watch, and as it is hidden, because the one who finds it.
Well, we'll have the youngest one here to look forward. I said the youngest.
Not the second youngest.
We will go, we retell the story. We will go both young and old. We will go with our daughters and with our sons. For we must observe unto God a special feast. So it was said before the first Passover observance, to this day, we continue to join together, both young and old, in this remembrance. 4 questions. Read the 3.
On all other nights we eat shemetz and matzah. Tonight, why do we eat only matzah? On all other nights we eat any kind of herbs. Tonight, why do we only eat bitter herbs? On all other nights we do not dip even once. Tonight, why do we dip twice? On all other nights we eat sitting or reclining. Tonight, why do we all recline?
And the tune for this goes something like this. That's the first of the four questions.
Let us all read. We were
Slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, but the Lord our God took us out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Had not God taken our fathers out of Egypt, then we and our children, grandchildren, family, and friends would still be enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. Even if we are all wise, receptive, experienced, and versed in Torah, it would still be our duty to tell about the Exodus from Egypt. The more one talks about the Exodus, the more condemnation that one deserves.
We begin the answer. Reader 4.
This night is different from all other nights because once we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, but Adonai, our God, took us out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. If God had not brought our ancestors out of Egypt, they, we, and those who follow us would still be slaves in the land of Egypt. Even if we know the story well and have told it many times, the more we tell it in great detail, the more it becomes part of our history and our heritage. This night is also different because once we worshiped idols, but now we worship only God alone, the one who is everywhere.
The following has a tune on page 12. It goes like this. Baruch HaMakom Baruch Shenatan Torah Li'amo Yisrael Baruch
Blessed be the omnipresent, blessed be Hashem, blessed be God who has given the Torah to the people of Israel. Praise be to God. The Torah bids us to tell the story. The Torah bids us 4 times to tell our children of the Exodus from Egypt. 4 times, Torah repeats, and you shall tell your children on that day. From this, our tradition infers that there are different kinds of people. To each we respond in a different manner according to the situation, the questions, and the need. Read 5.
The wise one asked, what is the meaning of the testimonies, statutes, and laws which the Lord our God has commanded us? Explain to this one that after the Passover Seder, we do not turn to other kinds of entertainment, but we hold within our minds and hearts the sacredness of the experience.
It is the wise person who wants to know the service God has for them to do.
The wicked person asked, what is this observance to you? By the words to you, this one whose heart is not inclined to God, implies that this service is only for you, the participant, not for him or herself. By excluding oneself from the community, God is denied. So tell this one bluntly, this is done on account of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. For me, not for the one who asked this question. If that individual had been here, that person would not have been redeemed.
The wicked one withdraws from anything beyond the self, and thus withdraws from the joy of redemption.
Read 6.
The simple soul asks, what is this all about? Tell this inquirer, with a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt from the house of slavery and oppression.
To the person of open simplicity, give a clear, honest answer, for as the psalmist says, God makes wise the simple.
As for the one who is unable to ask a question, you must open up the subject, as it is written, you shall tell your child on that day. This is an account of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt.
With one who has no need to know, no will to serve, you must begin with yourself, must be said to awaken the need, to give the will.
We also remember another group of people, all those who died in the Holocaust who did not survive to ask questions. Therefore, we ask for those of our sisters and brothers, why? We can only answer that question in silence.
as in the pages of our histories, so too in the event of our own time. In the encounters of our daily lives, these people, the wise, the simple, the ones who do not possess the presence of mind to ask, and the wicked, though these reappear in various guises. To this day, their questions must be pondered and answers sought. The story given life and meaning.
Just one comment. In the original Haggadah, it says 4 sons. We changed that to say 4 children. But I saw a very interesting sermon the other day, and it said, how about if we change this and we say there are 4 kinds of parents? The wise parent, the wicked parent, the simple parent, and the one who does not ask. What would that do to our appreciation of the holiday if we put the burden on the adults instead of on the children? All right. So I share that with you. I just came across that one last week.
There are many questions. Now we begin to answer them. Our history moves from slavery to freedom, towards freedom. Our story begins with degradation and rises to dignity. Our service opens with the rule of evil and advances towards the kingdom of God. Read to 7.
We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and God freed us from the bondage and oppression with a mighty hand. Had not the Holy One, praised be God, delivered our people from Egypt, then we, our children, our friends, our loved ones would still be enslaved. Even if all of us were wise, if all of us were people of understanding, if all of us learned all of God's commandments, it would still be our obligation to tell the story of the Exodus from Egypt. Whoever searches deeply into its meanings and applications is considered praiseworthy.
But our redemption is not yet complete.
We knew physical servitude in Egypt, but before Egypt our souls were already in bondage. In the beginning, our ancestors put other things as idols, as more important than God. But afterwards, God drew us into the service of the Almighty, as it is written, your ancestors of old dwelled beyond the river Euphrates, and they served other gods.
I, the Lord, took your father Abraham from across the river, and I led him into the land of Canaan. I increased his descendants. I gave him Isaac, and to Isaac I gave Jacob. When Jacob and his children went down into Egypt, Joseph was already in Egypt. Joseph had emerged with power over the land of Egypt. There was a famine in all lands, but in the land of Egypt there was bread. And Pharaoh said to the Egyptians, go to Joseph, whatever he tells you, do it. And all the world came to Joseph in Egypt. After Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation saw a new Pharaoh arise over Egypt, who didn't know who Joseph was. And he said to his people, look, the Israelites are much too numerous for us. Let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they increase. And if war should come, they should join with our enemies in the fight against us and gain the upper hand over the country.
Reader 8.
So they placed slave drivers over the Israelites and forced them into hard labor. And they built garrison cities for Pharaoh, the cities of Pithom and Ramses. The Egyptians made their lives bitter with inhumane labor at mortar and brick, and in all sorts of work in the fields. But the more they were oppressed, the more they increased and spread out, so that the Egyptians came to despise and dread all of the Israelites. So Pharaoh charged all of his people with this decree. Every boy that is born shall be thrown into the Nile and drowned, but every girl shall be allowed to live. We cried to Yahweh, the God of our ancestors, and God heard our distress, heeded our distress, our misery, and our oppression.
Reader 1.
God heard our cries, and God remembered the covenant with Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Jacob. God looked upon the Israelites, and God knew. One couple, Amram and Jochebed, hid their newborn at home for 3 months, defying the decree of Pharaoh that all male children 2 years and under should be drowned in the Nile. When the baby's cries became too loud, Jochebed put him in a basket on the river. Their daughter Miriam watched to see what would happen. When the Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe in the river, she discovered the basket. Feeling pity for the helpless child, she decided to keep him as her own and named him Moses, meaning drawn out from the water. Bravely, Miriam asked the princess if she needed a nurse to help her with the baby. The princess said yes. So it happened that Jochebed was able to care for her own son and teach him about his heritage.
Just one small comment here. The word for that little basket that Moses is placed in is tevah. And the only time that that is mentioned anywhere else is, strangely enough, Noah's boat is also called a tevah. So what is similar between the basket that Moses is in and the ark? What? Yes, but there's something else about it. Those of you who are boaters, what's missing? There's no rudder. It's an act of faith. It just gets carried wherever it will. And so the word, again, for that small basket and the word for Noah's ark are the same, and that connects the two of them.
God chooses Moses for leadership. Read it 10.
Moses was reared in the Pharaoh's palace, but he could not ignore the sufferings of his people under the whip of the oppressors. Once, when he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, he could not hold back his anger, and he slew the Egyptian. If the news were to spread, this would mean sheer danger for Moses. So he fled to the desert, land of Midian, where he lived as a shepherd. One day, while tending sheep at Mount Horeb, Moses saw a bush that was on fire, but the bush would not be burned. From the bush, Moses heard God calling him. God said, I am the God of your ancestors. I have seen the suffering of my people, and I have heard their cries. I will lead them out of Egypt and bring them to a new land, a land flowing with milk and honey. God sent Moses back to Egypt to bring the message of freedom to the Israelites, and also to warn Pharaoh that God would send plagues to Egypt if the Hebrews were not allowed to go free. Moses could just not envision himself as the messenger appointed to speak for God in this situation. I will be with you, God promised. Moses took up the challenge. And God said, I will go through the land of Egypt on that night, and I will mete out justice against all the gods of Egypt. I am the Eternal, have spoken it. God brought us out of Egypt by a mighty hand, by an outstretched arm, and with awesome power, with signs and great wonders, not through a messenger, not through any supernatural being, but the Holy One alone in solitary glory.
The time of the Israelites remained in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430th year, to the very day, or 2 days before, all the hosts of God departed the land of Egypt. The same night, the 15th of Nisan. This very night so long ago is God's watch night for the children of Israel throughout all time. We praise the God who keeps faith with the people of Israel. God's promise of redemption in ancient days sustain us now.
More than one enemy has risen up against us to destroy us. In every generation, in every age, some rise up to plot our very existence. But know this well, there is a divine power who sustains and delivers us.
10 plagues. When the Egyptian armies were drowning in the sea, the heavenly host broke out in songs of jubilation. God silenced them and said, my creatures are perishing, and you sing praises? Read 11.
With his older brother.
It's a very interesting little comment here. The people of Israel are described as breaking out in song. So the angels break out in song, and God shuts them up. And the angels say, they're singing, why can't we? He says, they went through pain. You didn't. They can sing. You can't.
11.
With his older brother Aaron as spokesman, Moses went before the Pharaoh, asking him to free the children of Israel. God brought signs and wonders, but Pharaoh remained stubborn. He made the Israelites work even harder. Finally, God sent 10 plagues on the Egyptians. Each one frightened Pharaoh. Each time he promised to free the slaves, but Pharaoh did not keep his word. It was only after the last plague, the death of the firstborn of the Egyptians, that their ruler agreed to let the Israelites go. We fill our wine cups to remember our joy in being able to leave Egypt. Yet our happiness cannot be complete, because the Egyptians, who are also God's children, suffered from their king's evil ways.
The Talmud teaches the sword of war comes into the world because of justice delayed and justice denied. God is urgent about justice. Because of injustice, the world began.
Though we descend from those redeemed from brutal Egypt, and have ourselves rejoiced to see our oppressors overcome, our triumph is diminished by the slaughter of our foe, as the wine within the cup of joy is lessened when we pour 10 drops of the plagues upon Egypt.
It's hard to pour 10 drops. So the tradition here says the third finger on the left hand. I was taught the fifth finger on the right hand, doesn't matter. That as each of the plagues is mentioned, we take 1 drop for each of the plagues when we spill it. So,
You do.
okay. By the way, we don't know the exact translation of some of the plagues. So some of them are obvious. Dom, what? Separdea. Frogs. Inin. We're not sure. Some small pestilential bug. Hello. Wild beasts. Deva. Cattle disease. Shpeen. Oils. Parad. Hail. Alubeh. Locusts. Hoshea. Darkness. Cut the roads. Rain of the first
Read it well.
Soon after Pharaoh allowed the Israelites to leave Egypt, he regretted his decision and ordered his army to bring them back. His soldiers caught up with the Israelites by the bank of the Sea of Reeds. When they saw the Egyptians, they were afraid and cried out. God told Moses to lift his rod. When he did, a strong east wind drove the sea back, leaving space for the Israelites to go across on dry land. The Egyptians came after them into the sea. Moses lifted his rod, and the waters rushed back, covering the Egyptians and their horses and their chariots. Then Miriam, Moses' sister, led the women in joyous dance and song, praising God for saving their lives.
There's one small thing before we get this. Again, for the women. The women played their instruments and they sang. And the rabbi said, where did they get the instruments from? They rushed out. They didn't have time for the bread to rise. Where did they get the instruments? And the rabbis answered, they had the faith that there would be a time when they could use the instruments for celebration. So they brought harps and timbrels. And this is one of the tunes for the prayer on Israel. Vehi she'amda lavoteinu v'lanu. Vehi she'amda lavoteinu v'lanu. Shelo echad bilvad amad aleinu l'chalotenu. El Hashem בכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם.
This is the promise that has sustained our fathers and us, for not only one enemy has risen against us to annihilate us, but in every generation man rise against us. But the Holy One, blessed be God, saves us from his hand. But now in the 21st century of the common era, once again, the B'nai Yaswa, the people of Israel, have a Pharaoh, one that at times they share with the Palestinians. This is the Pharaoh of heart and mind, and the Pharaoh of dehumanization, distrust, terrorism, and despair. And once again, God's help is needed to attain freedom. The mighty arm that lays siege to a village, the outstretched hand that throws a terrorist bomb, or slays with a knife, killing our people either one at a time or in masses, are tools of the Pharaoh, not of God. God acts through stretching our minds to hear others and open our hearts to understand the other. Tonight is a night of storytelling. The freedom of every Israeli and Palestinian, who are all children of Abraham, will come more quickly if we can learn to tell each other's stories in addition to our own.
Okay, there is a tune for the Diana. There are 15 verses. Someone has tried to figure out why there are 15. It's all speculation. I will chant one of them and then we can go back. Hotzianu mimitzrayim, Hotzianu mimitzrayim, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu.
God has bestowed many favors upon us. Nainu teaches us the switch from the mentality of always wanting more to be grateful for what God has given. As we recount the many blessings the Almighty did for us in bringing the children of Israel, our ancestors, out of Egypt, please join in saying the Hebrew word which means it would have been enough. Daenu. Adonai took us out of Egypt. Daenu. Punished the Egyptians and destroyed their idols. Daenu. Divided the sea and led us across on dry land. Daenu. Took care of us in the desert for 40 years and fed us manna. Daenu. Gave us the Sabbath. Daenu. Brought us to the land of Israel and built the holy temple. Daenu. For all these alone and together, let us say, Daenu. The symbols of Passover. You've already got.
Okay, we've gone through a few of these symbols on the plate. We went through this, and we went through the bitter herbs, and we went through the shank bone, and we went through the matzah. This is recent. Story goes, which has not been documented, but it's one of those urban legends, that someone remarked that women had no place in the service traditionally on the bima, on the dais, and they had as much place on the dais as an orange would have on a Seder plate. So we put the orange on the Seder plate. Now we have another little thing here. We have this, which is not mentioned, is the egg. So the question is, why do we have an egg? All kinds of explanations. My favorite goes that this egg was brought by the Passover bunny. It is a symbol of fertility associated with the springtime. All other explanations are fine, but remember the Passover bunny. Okay. Kol dor vador hayav adam lirot et atzmo כאילו hu yatsa miMitzrayim. Every generation it's incumbent on us to think of ourselves as coming out of Egypt. If we do not image ourselves as coming out of Egypt, we may never get an appreciation for what our freedom really would be like. So each of us has come out of Egypt.
If you have before you the words, most of you from Covenant know this is a little upbeat tune. And so if you have it, if you'll pull it out, Reverend here is lost tears, I'll find the poem. Words. Let's go. Jehovah Jireh, my provider, His grace is sufficient for me, for me, for me. Jehovah Jireh, my provider, His grace is sufficient for me. My God shall supply all my needs, according to His riches in glory. He will give His angels charge over me. Jehovah Jireh cares for me, for me, for me. Jehovah Jireh cares for me. Now that you know it, pick it up. Jehovah Jireh, my provider, His grace is sufficient for me, for me, for me. Jehovah Jireh, my provider, His grace is sufficient for me. My God shall supply all my needs, according to His riches in glory. He will give His angels charge over me. Jehovah Jireh cares for me, for me, for me. Jehovah Jireh cares for me. Please lift your cup and say with me. It is our duty to give thanks and sing praises to the Holy One, who did these miracles for our ancestors and for us. We praise the Almighty for bringing us from slavery to freedom, from sadness to joy, from darkness to light. When the people of Israel left Egypt, they left under God's protection. They fled at the sight, and the river Jordan turned backwards. Mountains leaped like rams, and all nature trembled at the presence of the Holy One of Israel. We praise you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who has freed us and our ancestors from Egypt, and brought us here to eat matzah and maror. Adonai, our God and God of those who came before us, help us celebrate future holidays and festivals in peace and in joy. Then we will thank you with a new song.
Nafshenu Baruch Atah Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. And we praise you, O Lord, who has freed the people of Israel. Baruch Atah Adonai, meaning to the left. Eloheinu melech haolam, borei puri hagafen.
Blessed art thou, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who creates the fruit of the vine. Let us joy.
At this point, we sing the first of the Psalms that normally are sung in the morning. And this is the only time when we break the Psalms up. And we break them up by eating the meal. And so the question is, why do we break the Psalms up with the eating of the meal? And the answer given is because the eating of the meal is also a song of praise. So this is one of the tunes that is used. It is the most famous. It says, Yisrael mitzrayim beit Yaakov be'am lo'ez Hayata Yehuda lekodsho Yisrael mamshalotav Hayam ra'ah bayanos Hayarden Yisrael li'abor Harim rakedu ha'elim Yeva'o ki mehetzon, Tzeit Yisrael mimitzrayim, Beit Yaakov mehe'am lo'ez, that corresponds to the mountains dancing and the rams mourning, etc.
Blessing over the matzah.
Okay, there are two blessings. One is the normal blessing for bread, and one is the special blessing for unleavened bread. And the rabbis that quantified everything said that you eat an olive-sized piece. Olives come in all sizes, so I'm not sure exactly, but we take from the middle matzah, and if there's not enough for your whole table from the middle matzah, you can use the others. Olives are like what? And we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishad v'mitzvotav v'tzidonu al achilat matzah, who has commanded us to eat matzah. Now, normally we separate out the eating of the bitter herbs from the mixing of them, because the blessing is not the mixing, the blessing is the eating of the bitter herbs. So take a bit of another piece of matzah and place some bitter herbs. When I first came to New Orleans, the family that we were with, the kids had a bitter herb eating contest. I did not join with them. By the way, you can eat these any time during the year. It is wonderful for clearing out your sinuses. Now how we mix more.
Oh, yeah, but you get the horse. This will be
And I'll open it right up.
Both times. Both times. Because you have to cut them like a sandwich. So you right there. I get it. That's what I
As we prepare to eat, it's a very interesting rule. If you're rich enough, and you have to invite someone to your table or the meal is not complete. The If you're not rich enough, you have to sit at the table of somebody who's rich enough to serve you. And the custom is for the host to thank the guest, not for the guest to thank the host. This is part of giving dignity to the person who is poor. The story is told that a man came to a rabbi who was famous for generosity and said, "Rabbi, can we say the blessings over 4 cups of milk?" And the rabbi said, "No," and hands him $25. And his wife was watching and said, "Why did you give him that kind of money?" He said, "Don't you understand? If he said he wants to say the blessings over milk, it's because he can't afford wine. So I gave him money for wine." He said, "You could buy a bottle of wine for $5. What's the other $20 for?" He said, "Don't you understand? If he wants to say the blessings over 4 cups of milk, he obviously cannot afford meat because you don't have meat and milk in the same meal. The other $20 was for him to buy meat so that he could celebrate the holiday." So this is, you either are rich enough to invite people to your table, or you sit at someone else's table. Otherwise, the holiday is not complete.
Okay, we're getting ready to have our meal, and it will go like this. Will the servers please go to get the matzo ball soup? The matzo ball soup will be brought to you, and following the matzo ball soup, we will eat dinner, and we ask that you go out this door here and walk around so that everybody will be going in the same direction and there will be no two-way traffic. If you go out this door and come down the hallway and take your plate with you, and the head table will go first. And we're going to ask you to come with us because the clergy is here. You and your friend with you. And, not yet here. They're going to bring you the matzo soup first. That will be served to you. And then follow them at this table, and then we'll just go by numbers. We'll just go down this way.
Big scoop.
get started. She's like,
I'm serving your honey.
When you go to get your meal, take your so you can get something. Take the cup so you can get something to drink too. think you're the youngest person here. And so we're going to ask you to find the Affirming. And I'll give you hints along the way. If I say cold, turn and go the other direction. If I say warm, go that way. Okay, start. Just a word. Cold. Warm. 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 Cold. Warm.
I bet it's in there.
No, it's.
Look on the table.
No, 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 no.
Yeah.
Real warm. Up. You can tell that it was real warm, but you and you get a present.
When this is over, we take
Okay, let's bring it down to the overall. And let's continue.
So we take 2 olive-sized pieces of matzah. It doesn't have to come from the afikomen. I think it would be interesting to have that small piece of afikomen feed the multitudes. I think that's been done.
Page 29 if you've lost your place. Eat it, yeah, and eat it. Remember, this is dessert. Okay.
Exactly.
Read the 13.
When God restores the exiles of Zion, we shall be as those who dream. Our hearts shall be full of laughter then. Our mouths shall sing forth in praise. Then will they say among the nations, God has done great things for them. God has done great things for us, and so we now rejoice. Restore us once again, O God, like sudden flood streams in the desert. Then those who sow in tears will reap in joy. Those who go forth weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, will return bearing the sheaves with song and with laughter.
Friends. Now, say right. May the name of the eternal be blessed from now until all eternity. Let us praise God of whose bounty we have partaken.
Let us praise our God of whose bounty we have partaken, and by whose goodness we live.
Through God's kindness, mercy, and compassion, all existence is eternally sustained. God is forever faithful, surpassing in goodness that fills all time and space. Sustenance is there for all people. None need ever lack. None being ever in want for food. We praise thee, O God, the one sustaining all.
Yerushalayim,
And build Jerusalem, O God, speedily in our days. We praise thee, O God, whose compassion ever builds Jerusalem. Amen. On the festival of unleavened bread inspires to do good.
On this day of liberation, make us a blessing.
On this festival of Pesach, preserve us in life.
Merciful God, rule over us forever.
Sustain us with honorable work, all merciful one. May we inherit a Sabbath of eternity.
May the one who blessed Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel, may the one who blessed Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, bless this house, these tables, and all those assembled here. May all our loved ones share in our blessings.
May the one who brings harmony to the worlds on high bring peace to the earth for all humanity.
God will give strength to our people. God will bless all people with peace.
Fill each other's cup.
Okay, can I have your cup?
Probably not only with kids on the table, some of the
Together. Blessed art thou, O Lord, sovereign of the universe, who has created the fruit of the vine. Amen. Let us pray. Let us not pour the fourth cup of wine. With this pouring, we also pour the wine into Elijah's cup, whose promise we now celebrate.
Okay. I want to explain something. The person who put together this Haggadah did an excellent job. There is, however, something missing. And I want to mention this because historically, we have to recognize that history is not always kind. And the Haggadah, being a reflection of all of the moments in history, also reflects moments that are not so kind. At this point, when Elijah comes in, the following is said, I translate. Pour out thy wrath upon the nations that know thee not, and upon the kingdoms that call not upon thy name. For they have eaten Jacob and laid waste his dwelling. Pour out thy fury upon them, and may the kindling of thy anger overtake them. Pursue them with anger and destroy them from under the heavens. Now you say, well, that doesn't seem to fit with the goodwill that we have been trying to instill during the Seder. These are passages from the Bible, but they were put into the Haggadah somewhere around the year 1100. Why? Because the first crusade that took place in 1096 wiped out approximately 1/3 of the Jewish population of Europe. And Not only that, but when they crossed Anatolia, they killed over 100,000 Eastern Orthodox, and then went into the land, the chosen land, and killed whoever they could. And so this was put in there to express anguish. And that's also part of our historical memory. So I mentioned this in passing, that yes, we tried to institute a feeling of goodwill, but we have to know that there were moments along the way which were very difficult moments. And these verses express some of that bitterness and despair that occurred around 1100.
Reader 14.
Elijah, the prophet from the village of Tishbe in Gilead, challenged the injustice of the king and overthrew the worship of Baal. He healed the humble sick, and he helped the widow. At the end of his days on earth, his disciple Elisha had a vision of Elijah being carried to the skies in a chariot of fire. Legend has it that God sends Elijah back to earth from time to time to assist the helpless and to turn the hearts of the children to those who gave them life. The prophet Malachi promised that Elijah would return to the hearts of parents to their children and the hearts of children to parents, and to announce the coming of the Messiah. Hence, Elijah has a place in every Seder. We open the door that he may enter. A special cup of wine has been set to represent the messianic promise for us and for all people. I will bring you into the land of promise.
How many images this moment brings to mind? How many thoughts the memory of Elijah stirs in us? The times when we were objects of distrust, when our doors were open to surveillance, when ignorance and hostile men forced our doors with terror.
The God of Jacob, and lay waste the place where you dwell.
The injustice of this war still brings to mind Elijah, who in defense of justice challenged power. In many tales from Jewish lore, he reappeared to help the weak, the timid, and the needy. Our people have always prayed.
May the Lord send us Elijah the prophet to comfort us with tidings of deliverance.
For every undecided question then of pain and sorrow, of unrewarded worth and unrequited evil, God will someday provide an answer.
There are links between heaven and earth, which promise an answer and resolution to eternal perplexities.
Elijah opened for us the rim of mystery and wonder.
And this is how it is chanted. Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishvi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu hagiladi, Bimhera v'yameinu yavo Eloheinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu hanavi, Eliyahu hatishvi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu hagiladi.
May Elijah the prophet come to us quickly and in our way, bringing the time of the Messiah. Prayer for peace. O God, source of life, creator of peace, in this hour of horror and destruction, of panic and fear, of those who would die to bring about the death of others, send your consolation to the mourners, your healing to the wounded, and your courage and patience for Israel, Israeli, Palestinian, Iraqi, and indeed all people, so that they may withstand these dreadful moments. Help your children, anguished and confused, to understand the fertility of hatred and violence, and grant them the ability to stretch across political, religious, racial, national, and orientational boundaries, so that they may resume the search for justice, peace, and truth. On this festival of our liberation, help us to free ourselves from the straits of narrow-mindedness, from the prejudices and patterns of behavior that keep us chained in an endless circle of victims and victimizers. Bless those who now fight to keep freedom alive in the world. Even more so, help us to free ourselves by freeing each other from the need to inflict suffering and pain. May all your creatures be guided by your vision of prophecy.
Natati shalom ba'aretz, ush of him ve'ein mafri. And that's the translation, the next one.
I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you. Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as waters fill the sea. With every fiber of our being, we beg you, O God, to help us not fail nor falter in the path of peace. And let us all say, Amen. Read 15.
In recent times, a new and important individual is also requested to be present at our Seder. We light a bowl of fragrant spices and incense for Miriam the prophet, a fountain of strength for the Jewish people, the one upon whom early wisdom and insight saved her baby brother, Moses, from the Pharaoh's edict.
Miriam the prophet, come join us at our Seder to give us strength and healing. May you soon lead us in joyous dance to celebrate freedom and redemption for us, for Israel, for women, and for all humanity.
And the tradition is that this is a cup of water, because Miriam is associated with water. She walks along the Nile, and she sings at the Sea of Reeds. And the Bible says that right after she dies, the people are without water. And so the tradition was that somehow there was a well that followed Miriam in the wilderness. And when she died, the well had nowhere to go, and therefore people were thirsty. So she celebrated with water.
We now ask the children to rise and open the door to the outside. Will you go open the outside door and keep it open for a second? Let us all read. May
Elijah and Miriam, servants of the Lord in times past, come to us quickly in our day, bringing us the time when all people will enjoy God's peace and freedom.
The Seder grows with history. The Seder has its own order, but as history unfolds and changes, history, as does the history of our people. Read the 16.
In times past, a solitary but empty place setting was set for the prophet Elijah. Centuries later, a second empty place setting was added to honor Miriam, the prophet, for the role she played in saving her brothers Moses and Aaron, and the effect God used her in ultimately bringing about the deliverance of the children of Israel from Egypt. Tonight we celebrate yet a third place setting, bringing to completion the divine number 3.
In Reconstructionist synagogues, a group within Judaism who strive to bring a life of faith in harmony with the world in which we live, a new vacant place has been added for those gays and lesbians who feel the need to hide who they are from the world, their loved ones and friends, and most especially from themselves. Please join me in reading aloud the prayer prayed in Reconstructionist synagogues around the world for those in hiding. As gay and lesbian Jews, we are aware of the loss of integrity we suffer due to pressures of the larger society. We often feel forced into the dishonest presentation of ourselves to ourselves and others. The gay and lesbians who feel they must pretend to be something that they are not.
the Jews who bring us to alienate from their tradition and community to win larger acceptance. Both are victims of the theft of identity and integrity committed by the sexual or religious majority. Creator of the universe, we ask that our hiding draw to an end, that we no longer feel we have to pretend, to promise falsely, to renounce ourselves, and that our fullest creative expression as gay people be among the blessings you bestow upon us.
Let us give praise to the Lord, sing praises, you who serve our God. Blessed is the name of the Lord now and forever. Of God, all your works we praise you. These words will be fulfilled when not only the children of Israel, but all of God's children join in the song of praise to the Creator of all things.
Okay, on the second night, it's explained very well in your text that there's a bridge between Exodus and the giving of the Torah. And the spiritual exercise is to prepare ourselves by going for 49 days and building up our sense of wholeness so that we can use our freedom to some purpose. And the blessing goes, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. And you count the day. Today is the first day of the Omer. Today is the second day of the Omer until you reach the 49th day.
We complete the singing. Please lift your cup for the final blessing. Hold on. Put it back.
Okay, let's do the fourth cup and then we'll do it.
Okay, raise your cup. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam v'ripri agathim. Blessed are you, O Lord, our God, sovereign of the universe, who calls forth the fruit of the vine.
Now, what happens at this point is that there are a bunch of songs that are usually in alphabetical acrostic that are children's songs. And if the children are still up at this point, they sing it. One of them is called Echad Mi'odea, Who Knows One. And it's a rhyming song, and it keeps building like this is the house that Jack built. It keeps building. So who knows one? Who knows one? One is?
A lonely number.
That's not here. One is? Okay. 2, the tablets of the law. 3, the patriarchs. 4, the matriarchs. 5, the books of the Torah. 6, the books of the Mishnah, the commentaries. 7, that's easy, days of the week. 8, the days before circumcision. 9 is easy, the months of pregnancy. 10, the commandments. 11, the stars in Jacob's dream. Let me tell you, you really have to search the Bible hard to find an 11. So that's 12, the tribes of Israel. 13 are the attributes of God. When Moses goes up the second time, he is told, God, Lord of mercy and grace, and so forth. The last one is a children's song that goes something like this. My father bought a goat for 2 zuzim. That's not much. And a cat came and ate the kid, which my father bought for 2 zuzim. And a dog came and bit the cat, which ate the kid that my father bought for 2 zuzim. You begin to get the feeling to this. A stick came and hit the dog, which bit the cat, which ate the kid, which my father bought for 2 zuzim. Fire came and burned the stick, which hit the dog, which bit the cat, which ate the kid, which my father bought for 2 zuzim. What we do is we try to sing these verses in one breath. Water came and quenched the fire, they burned the stick, which hit the dog, which bit the cat, which ate the kid, which my father bought for 2 zuzim. Then the ox came and drank the water, which quenched the fire, which burned the stick, which hit the dog, which bit the cat, which ate the kid, which my father bought for 2 zuzim. And the slaughterer came and slaughtered the ox, which drank the water, which quenched the fire, which burned the stick, which hit the dog, which bit the cat, which ate the kid, which my father bought for 2 zuzim. Then came the angel of death and slew the slaughterer. He drank the water, which quenched the fire, which hit the dog, which bit the cat, which ate the kid, which my father bought for 2 cents. Then came the Holy One, blessed be He, and slew the angel of death, who killed the slaughterer, who killed the ox, who drank the water, who burned the spirit, which it goes like this.
And how did you ever make it all the way through that one breath?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You take deep breaths. Okay. And it goes like this. God, Yah, God, Yah. These one of the praises of God, Yah, God, Yah. These one of the praises say God, Yah, God. And it goes on, and you finally do. I'll try it. And we end with L'Shana Haba Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. This is very interesting. My son lives in Jerusalem. One of my sons lives in Jerusalem. So someone asked the question, does he sing next year in Jerusalem if he's already there? And the answer is yes. There is a existent Jerusalem, and then there is the Jerusalem of a time of peace. And so because he is still waiting for the time of peace, he too can sing next year in Jerusalem. And it goes like this. L'Shana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. Okay, let me get the tune out of my head from the other one. Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. L'Shana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. L'Shana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. L'Shana Haba'a B'Yerushalayim. Just a little historical bit. When the Pilgrims came to this country, they saw this country as the New Jerusalem. And there was actually a movement at that time to make the national language of the United States of America Hebrew. It didn't work.
So let us say together, next year in Jerusalem. Let us thank Mary for our He does have some agape. You can be seated for that. Be seated. He does have agape for sale. You can see him immediately after the agape. I want to also thank our sister churches for being with us this evening. Beloved, First, I have to thank a terrific team that prepared our Seder meal. Team Roxanne, with Tyler, Jim, and who cooked the lamb, and Laura who prepared the horses. I want to thank the team that set up tonight who did a great job. And beforehand, thank the team that's going to clean up after. I want to thank our table leaders and our readers this evening. And let me just say that if you have nothing else on your agenda, I invite you tomorrow at 6 p.m. here for Stations of the Cross at 6. At 7 we will do our Good Friday 10 and Pray with the Liturgy of the Nail. You're invited to some, I know you all have all of this, but I'm going to say it anyway. You're invited to join sunrise service at 7:30 here. We followed by our annual Easter breakfast, and then the flowering of the cross between 7 and 10, and also we're going to shout for the resurrection at 10.
Amen.
Now, Eddie, would you like to tell us what's going on at your church this weekend?
Well, tomorrow, Friday, Good Friday, we're having all of our UCC churches in Montgomery at First Congregational Church. Word service at noon. I'm sorry.
5 minutes. 3 minutes.
No, they gave us 8 to 10 this year.
Yeah.
This year I have the 5th word. Last year I had 6 words.
No.
I had 5th word this year.
You're sick. I'm sick.
I'm 5th this year.
Yeah.
You're 6th. And at Pilgrim.
Sunday.
Sunday, Easter.
Easter egg. Easter egg.
Oh,
Saturday.
What?
We're having
Easter egg hunt to me Saturday.
And we have Easter, I forgot Easter egg hunt immediately following service on Sunday here.
Yes.
The 11th.
We'll be in Montgomery tomorrow with the other UCC folks, and then Sunday night at 6, we'll have a joyous celebration of resurrection.
It's sunrise service.
And there's a sunrise service in Avondale that we are participating with.
I'm sorry I didn't tell you about Sunday. I told you about tomorrow.
Are y'all doing something on Sunday?
That's all the juice I have. Our worship service is at 8:30 on Sunday morning, followed by Sunday school Easter program. And at 10 o'clock, we will have our award-winning Southern Living cooking by the Men's Fellowship of First Foundation.
Oh, cool. Thank you all. I hope you found this enjoyable. I love it. Thank you again, Barry. And thank you all for being our guests. And God bless you.